This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas. In a previous video, I showed a method for putting a hem on for a neckband, and it wasn't too hard to do, but I want to show another method because I have a fantastic shortcut for this, and you'll find lots of other places where you can use this shortcut. Now, this is my mocked up neckline of a sweater. And it's not following any real pattern. I just made it so that I could demonstrate how you would apply this hemmed neckband. This is a stretchy neckband that you can pull over a head easily, so it's very good for children's garments. This is also a very good neckband, as is the other, for cut and sew. Now, I did not start out knitting using cut and sew. We always did neckbands this way. However, if you've got a more complicated pattern, shaping the neckline is a lot more trouble. Like here's a two-color pattern, or it could be tuck stitch, or it could be ribbed. With cut and sew, you use your sewing machine, you sew the neckline you want and trim away the extra. And I do hope to demonstrate that soon. Instead of making the hem, doing the loose row, taking it off on waist yarn, rehanging the neckline, rehanging the hem, pulling it through, picking up the hem and binding off. Instead, I'm going to hang the neckline, make the hem, and then pick up the hem right there and finish it off. So let's get started with that. The first thing that I need to do is determine the width of the neckline and hang it with the wrong side facing me this time. I have determined that I am going to do 36 stitches for my neckline. So that goes from needle number 18 on the right to needle number 18 on the left. These are the needles onto which I'm going to pick up my neckline. I'll go across and back just to even them up. And I'm also going to open the latches because I'm lazy and that makes it easier to do. Now, I'm going to turn my neck around. I want the purl side toward me. And I am picking up the center stitches on the waist yarn first. And I am picking them up on the same needles they came off of because by picking up the center first, I can center the work and pick up the same number of stitches on each side of the center stitches so that my neck is smooth and doesn't pull toward one side. It's symmetrical. So I am getting these last two. I know there were 12, so I'm getting 12. One more to get my tool in there. There it is. Okay, so that is the center of the neckline, and I can leave the waist yarn on until I'm done with it. Now, on a real neckline, I would join one shoulder and I would pick up everything, including the back of the neck, and do this all at once and then finally join the last shoulder. But for this little sample, to keep it simple, I am going to pick up just over to the shoulders. And I am picking these stitches up deep enough so that I am below the edge on the right side. I don't want the horizontal lines caused by the decreases to show. And sometimes it helps me get it even if I kind of go in between. The one hard and fast rule is never pull two needles through the same hole in the knitting. Never, never. And then I just got a couple more to do here. This one, and this one, and this one. So I've picked up one side And I'm going to go pick up the other side in the same way. Then I will come back and show you the next step. My neckline is on the needles, and here's my weird step you're not expecting. I'm bringing all these needles out to hold position. And then I'm going to get a contrasting color of ravel cord. I have some bright pink. This works best with really thin thread. And the Artiste nylon thread that I usually use for ravel cord works great. This happens to be some really thin rayon yarn. And what I'm doing is I am weaving it over and under the needles and hold. Let's zoom in and see that more closely. So you can see I've gone over this one and under this one and over this one and under this one. And I'll just keep weaving these in. And after they're woven in, then I push it back against the gate pegs. And there we go, I've gone across. Now I'm going to begin the hem. And just to be consistent, I'm going to use the same kind of hem as I used before when I did the blue one in the last video. This is going to be a 6-row picot hem, and I'm going to do it on a tension tighter than my garment tension, or a tension and a half roughly tighter than my garment tension. I'll zoom out and just show you how. The machine is set to knit all the needles, including the ones in hold, so they're all going to pop back. What this ravel cord line does is it perfectly marks my pick up row, and I'm going to do my pick up row looser. So for a tension 5 neckband, I'm going to do a tension 9 pick up row because I'm going to use these stitches twice. So across I go. As soon as my neckband pickup row is done, I go back to my tension 5, and we'll count that as the first of our 6 rows for our picot hem. Let's just put a weight on each end. And I need 5 more rows before I do the picots. Now to do the picots, I bring out every other needle. But if I end up bringing out the end needle, that's no good. I'm not going to move an end needle. So there'll be 2 on the end, and that's okay. There typically will be with an even number of stitches. Now this is one hem you could use, but I want to point out that you could use a plain hem, you could use a mock rib hem, you could use ribbing, you could use a Fair Isle hem, whatever nifty hem that you'd like to do, maybe a scalloped hem, that could go here. It tends to be true that when you make a neckline finish, all eyes are on that neckline edge, so you want to have done a swatch first and know that you like the looks of the hem you've selected. Now I transfer all these stitches, but I leave these needles in B position, which is working position, and that's what makes the eyelets. If I push them all the way back, it looks more like a runner. That was the outer hem, and I need 6 more rows for the inner hem. Double check that all my needles are in work, and then do my 6 rows. Now I'm going to pick up the hem. Now once in a while you'll see this direction in a pattern. They'll tell you to pick up the first row that you pulled through, but the trouble is you can't see it. So you're guessing at what to pick up, and it might turn out okay. But with this little trick, you can see it, and it'll be easy to pick it up. I'm going to zoom in on this end and show you what stitches you pick up. So when I lift this up and I look along here, those stitches from that pickup row, that loose row, the first row I pulled through, happen to have this pink thread through them. And I can put my tool where the pink thread went, exactly where it went, and that gives me exactly the right loop to pick up. Now, these aren't really stitches. I might call them stitches, and when I do, I should apologize. These really are the loops between stitches, and there is one less at the bottom of a hem. There'll always be one less than at the top of a hem, because these are the in-betweeners. So I start on the second needle, and then I just go where the pink yarn goes to find the loop to pick up. So easily seen, and because it was a loose row, easy to get my tool inside it. And I just take my time and get the stitch. Now I just want to mention that you can ignore the ravel cord. If it goes in the hook, you don't care. It won't do a bit of harm. Also, the ravel cord is going to be very, very easy to get out later, unless you split it. If you split it, then you just give it a snip and it'll still come right out. Because I'm not using the ravel cord that came with the machine, because I'm using this bright colored pink yarn, and I have yards and yards and yards and yards of it, I don't care if I have to cut it. But if you really don't want to cut your ravel cord, you'll have to make sure that you don't split it. So now I'm picking up in the center where I had waste yarn, and I've left the waste yarn. I'll leave it to the very end. It keeps the stitches secure. If I didn't like my neckband, I could rip it out and I could go again without losing these stitches that were on the waste yarn. So I'll get these last few picked up and then be back to show you the next step. My hem is picked up all the way across, but I need to do a bind off. And what I'm going to do is bring these out to hold to make it easier for the machine to knit this final row. I am not loosening the tension. Because it's a neckband, I'm going to do a needle bind off. And a needle bind off that I'm using will give me a stretchy neckband to go over somebody's head. So I knit across this last row and then do my needle bind off. Now, just to make sure I have enough yarn to sew a needle bind off, I am getting at least 3 times the width of the knitting. How about this much extra for luck? And then cutting my yarn. And then my favorite way to do a needle bind off is to put weights on the work. And then push the needles out. I'm using a comb to push them out, but I'm bringing the needles out beyond the gate pegs. This keeps me out of gate peg territory, and I let the stitches come with them. So you see the stitches are hanging from the needles, and what makes the stitches secure is the weight, and they're out here close to my body and away from the gate pegs. And then I'll show you the stitching. So here I am on the left-hand end of the work, and I'm going to thread my yarn in a tapestry needle and start doing the back stitch bind off. I will start by going away from me into the second needle and then toward me back out through the first needle. So from number 2 to number 1 through those first 2 stitches. Now I back up the back stitch, go in needle number 3 from the left, and come out number 2 like that. Pull that. You don't pull it super tight. You want this to be stretchy, but you also don't want it slack. So just pull it until the stitch lies flat. And I take my time. The fact that the work is on the machine holds the stitches apart, and that keeps me from being too tight. Just about all of us have made a sweater that was miserable to pull over the head, that was too tight. And of course, if you're doing these for children, they love mommy, but they do not want a sweater that hurts to put on. So, this works for that. Anyway, I just keep going back to the next new empty stitch and going front to back through that, and then back to front through the stitch I used before. And I'll get the rest of this sewn up and show you the next steps after the sewing. Now, I've finished my back stitching. A lot of people like to back stitch after they use waste yarn and sit and do it in their lap, but I actually like to do this at the machine because this helps me to get the most perfect possible back stitch with plenty of stretch. So I am just putting the needles back out of work, and then we are going to get this ravel cord out. I'll just grab an end of it and pull it out. Now, it didn't pull right out. That's because I split it, so I give it a little snip and pull out what I can. Grab it again, pull out some more. Oh, look, I've split it lots of places. Well, you'll probably do better than me. But even if you split it, all you really have to do is grab a tool and pick at it. This was not Artiste nylon thread. It is much less prone to splitting. But this is okay because it shows you what to do if you do split. There we go. That's all out. And then I flip it over, and let's get this waste yarn off too. Split the waste yarn again. I get to do another little clippy deal. Get the waste yarn out. Okay. Now I want you to get a really good look at this neckline. So I am going to do a couple of things. The first one is I'm going to set the hem. I'm putting a hand knitting needle in it and just giving it a pull down. That way it's fully folded. And then I'm going to hang it on the gate pegs so I can get in there with the camera and really show you what that would be like if you use that for your hem. Here's my finished neckband. And I think you can see that this really does look terrific all along. And if you look at the back side of it, this fully encloses the neckline edge. So if you had done a cut and sew, or if there was some sort of flaw in the neckline edge, that would all be covered. And this is quite stretchy. There is not any problem with pulling that over your head. If you like this content, these brief but careful machine knitting lessons, then you can help me with the YouTube algorithm by clicking on the subscribe and by clicking on the notification bell. You are also very welcome to join my free Facebook group, Knitting with Diana Sullivan, and you can find my books and videos at www.dianaknits.com. I also have a blog with lots of free patterns and machine knitting inspiration at dianaнаtters.blogspot.com.